Good evening, and let me properly welcome you to the September Agile Coaching Exchange. It's great to see so many of you and have so much interest in this event tonight. Just before we clicked on recording, we've got people from as far afield as Bromley, Chennai in India, Toronto, and of course we have our speaker tonight, Finn, coming in from Dublin. Before I go into the session and introduce our speaker, I want to say thank you very much to Simon Machin, who has helped us a great deal today by letting us use a kind of wider capacity Zoom so we can get more of you in. And it also means there's fewer nag notes from me, Helen and Vlad going, update your RSVPs. So thank you very, very much for that, Simon. We're really grateful.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So our speaker tonight, I first encountered or was aware of Finn in 2018 when I'd been contacted about some work in a healthcare company, a really interesting thing that they were trying to do at the time. And I was going through a series of conversations with the CIO of that company. We were talking about, what they wanted to change, what was happening for them and all that. And this name kept coming up and it was Finn. And we were having conversations. They were talking about, how would you do this? How would you do that? And it was, oh, but we've got this guy we've heard about this guy who's got this book. We really want it to go that way. So this is the book, by the way. This is the 12 Steps to Flow. And I had a look at the book at the time. There was nothing wrong with it. As a coach, you always have to be careful of if you're contracting with someone that isn't in the room, and it felt a bit of a funny one that, who's going to be doing the stuff. And of course, inevitably the question was, well, why don't you get Finn to do it? And I don't know where that went. Maybe Finn, you could update us on that. But it was interesting. And from looking at the book and understanding a bit about Finn's work, it's most interesting to me, and I think to our members tonight. Finn has been in various CTO and CIO roles from places like Aviva, Paddy Power. He's also been in finance, companies like Visa and travel. And he's held very, very high level, C-level roles as CIO, CTOs. Not only that, he's matching this up with his approach to Agile and transformation. And I know often, or you'll know often from our community, that we don't often have speakers that have necessarily done that up at that level. So it's really, really good to have Finn here tonight. I'm really pleased to welcome him to the Agile Coaching Exchange. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome you, Finn, and hand over to you.
Thank you. What a great introduction. I need to get you as a warm-up man for all of my speeches, I think. So let me get this going. I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully you're going to be able to see that. If you just let me know if it's come through. How are we doing? Yeah, very good. Okay, so I'm going to talk about transformation today, transformation sprint particularly. And but as Ben mentioned, yeah, I've been in as a CIO or a CTO in many organizations, mostly financial services to start with, and then switched into .coms. And so that was a bit of a culture change for me. And that kind of changeover really got me introduced to Agile back in early 2000s. I won't say exactly what date it was, and I also got really educated around coaching, how to coach people rather than being a manager or a leader, how to actually get the power from individuals to come up with ideas themselves, solve problems rather than myself. And I've worked in the US, Argentina for 3 years, and various other countries, and always in that that kind of role. But since we published the book, I got so much interest from companies that are going through some form of transformation or wanting to adopt new ways of working, that with a colleague of mine, we set up our own company last year, and we do get lots of companies all around the world asking us to help them out. And I even have this one thing which I do with organizations. I say to them, if you buy me a beer, and now it's a virtual beer, I'll talk to you for free, just to see if I can help you with any guidance or ideas, because we're all about getting information and then sharing it back with the community. So we kind of do full transformations, which we call enterprise flow. I'll mention a bit about that. And we're now doing much more around fixing and starting transformations in a short time box period. And then we write about those experiences in the books to help other people to learn from us. And we find it really valuable. And so we're really known for those publications. And the first book is much more colorful and a great introduction to business people, because it de-jargonizes a lot of the Agile stuff. We talk about social interaction rather than stand-ups. We talk about extreme visualization rather than saying what those visualizations are. We create things which are not normally on the menu. And we also talk about value, which is something that organizations like, discovering value, managing it and delivering it. And for us, that's the essence of what we would call business agility. And just to show you this, I'm not going to go through it today, but if you think about the traditional kind of agile world, it tends to be down that sort of right-hand side, which is the kind of Scrum or Kanban type of work. And we've been working much more upstream, bringing in various different organizations in the business, including product teams, obviously, and project teams, but executives into the whole portfolio processing, kind of like bringing them into this agile world to get them doing more prioritization, and also coming up with the right things to work on. So what's the right innovation? What's the right things for us to do? And have IT deliver that at pace, rather than having IT just deliver things without that kind of lens from the rest of the organization. I'm going to cover some of these things, but not too much, but the idea being that we want to go much further upstream. And so to implement flow in an organization, we had to develop some tools to allow that. So for us, that meant how to bring an organization on a transformational journey or change journey. And it's something that normally you sort of rock up and you say, here's my method or my practice or whatever, go ahead. And that doesn't work with big organizations. They need some help. So we use two kind of things. One is what we call lighthouse thinking, which is a way of breaking things down into small steps, be that projects or big problems. And that was a book that we were going to put out quite soon, but we got so much interest about transformation that we switched it. So we've got this other book called Transformation Sprint, which is coming out in about 3 weeks' time. And Lighthouse will come out a little bit later, but transformation seems to be the thing that lots of people are talking to us about. And we kind of went into this, well, what is a transformation? Because a lot of people don't really know, there are different flavors. And a business transformation itself is your entire business, your complete operating model has been disrupted in some way. For instance, COVID. So there are a lot of businesses running around now looking to replace their products and services with other products and services. So that's a big thing. Digital transformation has been around for a while, and that's really adding in some digital capability or technology where it doesn't exist. And maybe that's on the front end with the web or apps. It can also be back office, and there's a lot of interest around artificial intelligence, etc. And then what organizations are calling agile transformation, which always gets me a bit confused, but it really changing the ways of working in a company to help them deliver products and services faster. Some of these things get interchanged, but the one thing is that it is transforming or changing an organization and the way it works. And those drivers for transformation have just been accelerated. I published this in LinkedIn quite some time ago. It's got thousands and thousands of views, which is what I call the COVID leadership change curve. So what we're seeing is organizations, when this first erupted, were very, very disrupted and really got up, to like working at home was the main priority. That was the one thing we needed to get working. And that's happened. Then organizations have been going through this phase of, I actually need to protect my cash now because my profits are going down. The usual thing about looking at reducing the workforce, or it was selling things which are not core to the business, or some form of like desperation, what we're going to do. And we see that's 2020. And a lot of the clients we worked with went quiet for 3 months or 4 months because they really are protecting their money. What we're seeing though now, and we're going to see this next year, is that actually organizations will have to change. They will have to think about how they serve their customers. Maybe they've already got some assets. Maybe they can innovate. Maybe they can look at a wider ecosystem of partners rather than always going it alone. And using some of our techniques, of course, which is to do a little lighthouse project to test and learn, and then start to remodel the business. So we think next year we're going to see a lot of transformation activity, and we're already seeing some of it start now. And that volatility and uncertainty really is making transformation really critical, and we're seeing that quite often. So this is what happens, right? Your company says, right, we need to transform, and well, we need to deliver a big change program to address that kind of loss in revenue. And they say, let's go and hire a big experienced consultancy. That's not a bad thing. They've done it before. Maybe that can help us. And 4 months later, you've spent 500,000 euros, because I'm based in Dublin. You have a 400-page PowerPoint presentation. It tells you what you need to do, but it doesn't always tell you how to do it. And there's a bit of deflation here. But the business embarks on the transformation, said, well, let's go and do it. And then it fails. And that's the shame, because you know, if that happens to you, you're not alone. We've seen that in a number of organizations. And do you actually know how many fail is a question that we've asked people. And what McKinsey is saying is that, you know, an awful lot of business transformations fail. A lot of platform transformations fail, moving from one core technology platform to another. And almost all the digital transformations fail. So that's, for us, it's not very good, and it doesn't look good for next year if that's your, you know, one of your main drivers is to transform. So we thought we'd do a little breakout here at this point, and to say to, you know, to each of you, if you've been involved in a transformation or a large program which has failed, do you have any idea why? And Ben is going to help me put you into groups, and then we'll have a chat in a few minutes. Okay, great. Well, thanks for that. What we're looking for here now is, after the conversation, if anybody would like to, you know, maybe give us you know, one or two ideas as to why they think transformations or large programs fail. Has anybody got something they would like to share? If not, don't worry, because I've got plenty. But
yeah, I was in a group with Claire, and we had single person driving something. So when that person leaves, it kind of crumbles and the passion disappears. And also, from my side of things, a lack of communication. So different teams work on different things, but thinking they're all talking the same language,
yeah.
But, you know, not really.
Got it. Perfect. Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, breakout session 9. We hit on like in a large organisation, things breaking down because the change, the expectations around what was involved in the change only went so far, and it was expected for the people kind of doing the work. And when it got into kind of the senior kind of levels, the appreciation of that there's some significant change for you here too was kind of resisted, right. And things failed from that point of view. Yeah.
Yep. Perfect.
I think in large organizations as well, I would say politics as well. Someone might have a vision, but that vision might actually clash with some of the other interests of other areas of the business, particularly when you have a very complex large organization. So
yeah, it's perfect. Perfect. Should we take one more if there is one, and if not, I can crack on. Anybody else like to share?
Got people change aspects, comms alignment measures came in on the chat there.
Yeah.
I think transformation for me, it failed. It also they don't recognize why things are at what it was. So didn't understand so external force coming in, consultancy coming in, trying to change everything, but without knowing why things are being like that. And it's too radical without the better understanding of the situation. That's quite often lead to failure.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Well, I think it's great. I think I'll share mine now, and maybe that will correspond with some of the ideas that we've heard as well. So why do so many fail? Well, we think there are kind of 4 main reasons why, and we'll drill a little bit on these. The first one, believe it or not, is this kind of agile IT business divide. And we call it agile IT business divide because IT is actually quite good at value delivery, you know, putting in place its methodologies, trying to look at ways of working through DevOps and continuous delivery, you know, actually trying to use cloud, and that sort of stuff helps you to get much more agile. From an IT perspective, we see some businesses actually get quite good at managing that value by having a more adaptive project management office, which is not constrained by a yearly kind of process, which might force where the budgets there are also added like on a yearly basis. I was talking in our sort of breakout a little bit about how if you've got a multi-year program and a multi-year budget, quite often end of year 1, it might go away and then you have to compromise on the deliverables. You don't see a lot of agile risk management these days or agile security, and they're seen as things that slow stuff down, but they are very much necessary in today's world. And that area needs to sort of be beefed up a little bit. And you do see product management teams that are very demanding on product features and probably less about the care and feeding of a platform that you've been working on for years. But we don't see businesses doing any value discovery. There's a bit I mentioned in the middle or at the beginning about flow, is that organizations do tend to sort of do a lot of stuff. They deliver a lot of functionality, but have they really looked at what does that mean to the customers? Have they used some assets that they already have? And do they understand where new customers might be hanging out in different markets? Do they have to do everything on their own? Can they work with an ecosystem? And are they any good at real innovation? And we see innovation sometimes being dropped to one side, but it's business agility is much more than just IT agility. And that's the bit we talk about here. And sometimes you get this sort of clash of cultures within an organization. The second, we see are core platforms. So the core platforms that are actually, for us, one of the biggest factors in transformational failures, because you've got this vision of having a full end-to-end digital experience for your customers, but in fact, what you've got are sometimes platforms that are managing your customers or your products and services that have been around. The record we've seen so far is 1970, or we've seen multiple platforms where you've got like one organization had 60 plus platforms that all talk to each other via a single view of the customer and some back-end data transfer. And this is one of the challenges, is that you kind of think, well, can I transform a core platform? I need to get a better customer experience. That's what I want to do. And I want that full end-to-end digital experience. As I say, you've got a massive legacy estate to transform, and they are knitted together with the single view of customer, which has been built up over many years. And the blockage we often find is that no one's got the courage to start working on building out a new platform, to start hollowing out or moving across to something brand new, taking a small steps approach, or actually starting to strangulate those old platforms to create new ones. So what do? You end up putting your digital front end or your app on top of that legacy estate. This is my favorite picture here. Right? So in other words, you're keeping that old legacy there, and you're giving the illusion that you've got a digital capability out to the market. And actually, successful companies have tackled their legacy platforms in the past. Amazon went from .NET to whatever they have today. They went through major rewrites, and other organizations have done the same. But the least successful companies just add more and more platforms, which make it more and more complicated to do a transformation. That complication or complexity is number 3. And we think that businesses become complex because they keep adding stuff. They don't really take time to consider simplification at all. And actually, complexity can actually be driven by leadership as well, because the leadership themselves, maybe not deliberately, have designed some complexity into the organization because of their operating model design. Their hierarchies, the teams that they create, are actually not working well together. So I'm the boss of this team, 100 people, you're the boss of that team, 100 people. Is that the right structure to do a transformation? Or for a modern business, are the kind of organizational structures today a little bit out of touch with what we really need in terms of being transformative? So the obvious thing is to start looking at these complexities and trying to simplify them. And one of the things that I've seen in the past is where organizations have retired old products, or they've got rid of old services that eventually allow you to kill a platform. Or if you've got businesses whereby the leadership can get involved with how your current processes work, they'll soon say, why do we do that? And why is there 15 sign-off levels for procurement? And why do I have to go through this? They haven't got any view of the complexity that's grown up over the years. And that's something that they need to see. So we talk to employees in the organizations about what's happening in the sort of company. And we believe in collective intelligence. It's getting everyone together to tell us, what do you think we should do about this? And it's not untypical when we sort of go in and start chatting to the individuals in the organization. You get this kind of feedback, and we give it to the leadership, which is that the management structure is like too complicated. We've got too many production platforms. It takes 3 months to set up a test platform. I mean, why does it take so long to get something set up to help you in your day-to-day activity or for transformation? You've got too many contractors. You've got a lot of negativity between teams. And this thing about customers, a lot of big organizations are so far removed from their customers, they don't even think about them. They may be trying to do the Amazon thing and put a chair in the room and say, oh, there's our customer. What does the customer think about this? But that's just not good enough. Some of the organizations that we deal with, particularly if they're also B2B. And simplification is never seen by leadership as a priority, and refactoring is frowned upon. So some of the old platforms could have been, improved or changed over the years, but you never get enough of the budget to be able to do it because it's always adding new features. The fourth one was people that somebody mentioned earlier. I thought that was good. I didn't plant that one at all, but there are many great people working in companies today, and I actually do appreciate that. And I think that the pressure that they're under right now is unprecedented. I mean, people are actually having to work really hard and justify their positions, and working remotely is also very difficult to get some face time to prove that you're really doing a great job, which is a real shame. But there are great people. But in transformation, there are many people that actually add to the failure themselves. And that can be, as someone mentioned, the wrong person leading the transformation. That happens quite frequently. We've got a big transformation, it's got a big budget, so we need to give it to a very senior person to deliver. And I always say that availability is not a skill. I mean, that's the thing. You put this person in role, they've never done a transformation before, and this is really, really dangerous. You also get toxic people in organizations. We have to face it, they do exist. And leaders don't like dealing with toxic people. And if they're in a transformation, sometimes they want you to fail. And they'll withhold information. They might make life difficult for you. This, for me, is one of those leadership issues that somebody needs to address, and they never do. Then there's the impacted people from a transformation. So you say, good news, we're going to really going to transform our old platforms, we're going to replace them, we're going to create a digital center of excellence. Hooray! And then what the team here is, my job is being made redundant. So they're getting rid of me because I'm part of the old world, and they're talking about the new world. And that's that communication thing. The communication is not done well enough. And the people that could be impacted are not necessarily involved in the change that's coming. And this is the consultant thing. I know we've got consultants here today, including my friend from Deloitte. Consultants, this is not necessarily their fault. I mean, what's happening is that they actually are given quite often the role of doing the new work because they've got the skill. So they've got the skill, they put onto the team, and they said, right, you help us with the transformation. Very little is done in terms of, let's train the existing staff with some expertise. Let's do some knowledge transfer at the beginning. We always do knowledge transfer at the end, which is a real shame. So the employees that are left working on legacy get disgruntled, and quite often they have the information that's needed to allow you to transform to whatever that new future operating model looks like. And then there's the PMO. Their intentions are good. And I know we've got some PMO people on here as well, so I'm expecting some very feisty questions later on. They do get transfixed on the transformation startup. This is what the leadership wants. They want the governance, they want the reporting, they want the RAG statuses. They want, when are we going to have our meetings? When are we going to find out this? Where's the budget? And they're not really necessarily that involved with what the direction should be, what the goals are. So their job is to do, the framework around how it's going to be delivered. Again, not what it is that's being delivered. And I always say to people, is there one thing you'd like to change about your company? And we haven't got time to do this today because I'd like to get some questions. I think people are ready to ask about this. But when we talk to them, there are lots of things that people would like to change. They would like to change the procurement process. They'd like to change the budgeting process. And the thing is that change isn't easy, and transformation, therefore, is even harder because you're changing everything, potentially. And that's what, for us, the transformation, it never really arrives at that right future operating model for a company. And I'm going to explain that a little bit more about what I mean. In fact, I'm going to explain what an operating model is. This is not an MBA class by any stretch of imagination, because I'm not very good at that. But, a traditional operating model, if you look into this, you'll find the Porter model goes back to the 80s. How you connect your logistics to your services, your sales and marketing operations. These are your primary activities. And HR, IT, procurement, these are all supporting your business. And this is a model that you'll see that people talk about on the business side. In fact, they probably still teach it in the MBA classes. And a lot of transformations are about moving away from that model, adding in the digital capability that's missing, or transforming the business in some way to create new products and services. Often they're told, well, you need the Spotify model, or you need a scaled framework like SAFe. And these models are being brought to you before you've even decided what you need to do. So it's like, this is going to give you the answer. And unfortunately, those models are really somebody else's context, or they're not modeled for you to actually help you move to that future state. So we talk about having an operating model in an organization which is more generative, and a picture always helps. So some of the things I talked about earlier on before the breakout was how we focus on value discovery, the new things to work on, the valuable things to work on, how an organization can manage that effectively in their portfolio of work, and how IT can deliver it. And what you're aiming for is to grow your customer base, maybe to grow your partner base so you can actually grow more customers into that ecosystem. And some things you have to be aware about in a modern business is that you do need some security. You need cybersecurity, agile security practices. You definitely need core capabilities for this new world, and you have to keep changing those capabilities. You can't just leave people working on older technology for years and years and years. You need to bring them on this journey. And learning mechanisms are often missed. And I think that's a disconnect sometimes between HR teams and what the actual need is for an organization that's moving into the future. And so we see this as something that constantly needs to be remodeled, and it's not a one-off thing. So how do you transform an operating model? That's where we came up with our idea for transformation sprint. We use this because it's time boxed. It's a one-off thing, potentially, just 4 weeks. And in that 4 weeks, you do a lot of analysis around talking to people in an organization. They know what's going wrong. They know what the issues are. We need to pull that information out. And quite often, leaders are blindsided because people don't have the ability to feed that back to the leadership team without getting told off or in some form, get into trouble. So we take a lot of that and that perspective from employees and externally as well. We look at Glassdoor, we look at all sorts of material. We look at the market reports, everything. We create this sort of list of issues, but we funnel it down to the 10 things that could prevent you from doing a good transformation, or the 10 things you need to do to allow you to do a good one. And that comes from, well, where are we now? What is the definition of where we are as an organization, and where do we want to get to? And are we certain that we can get those priorities from the leadership that says, right, we're going to go from here to here, and we're going to get your backing? And we do that kind of like test and learn, even at this stage, with a little lighthouse project. We'll say, okay, let's put together one holistic, one multidisciplinary team. We're going to have that team learn new ways of working. We're going to, maybe it's going to be using some new practices, but we're going to give it the authority to be self-serving. We're going to allow it to build something, and we're going to, as a leadership team, we're going to observe and see if we can take that team, split it into 2, and then 4 and 8 and so on, and do some cell division. So that skill is starting to move throughout the organization. And that's the sprint itself. And the Lighthouse project, as I mentioned, is kind of a small step strategy. It's not rocket science, but I think somebody mentioned there earlier on that some transformations go in with too many objectives. There's too big. It's a 3-year program. It's 150 people, and value is like kicked down the road. You don't see any value from it till years in the future, and people then lose heart. And the other thing that someone said, of course, yeah, what happened is that the sponsor of that project, over a 3-year period, there's a good chance that leader moves on, and therefore the project then, or the program for transformation, stops. But by taking this small steps approach, you build upon this, and each thing that you do has to have some value to the team or value to the organization, and scaling it down in order to skill up the team is really important. And if you need to use third parties to help, that's fine, as long as you're all on the journey together. And this iterative approach really can help you with other parts of your operating model. So you can actually go through this if you want to and target certain areas. And we've helped some organizations do a quick sprint around how do we make security more agile, or how do we actually handle our value management. But at the end of the day, from a transformation perspective, what you're trying to do is do something that's radical for you and your organization, and it's very strategic. The Agile transformation, in our view, this transformation sprint is what can set you on the right journey. And we've used it like maybe 6-7 times now, and we've refined it as a tool that we use for flow. And for us, that's, I think it's important to have some practical experience of something rather than it being some method that you've kind of invented. And we think, who will lead this change? And a lot of the people we've been talking to that we think need to be involved much more in this change. Could be you guys, could actually be Agile coaches, and coaches that really want to broaden their experience from IT into a wider business role, helping business colleagues to understand the power of social interaction, the power of visualization, to have them involved in actually understanding where they are and where they need to get to, and guiding them on that journey. And coaching, I think, is very undervalued from a business perspective. You do see some leaders that have an executive coach, which is kind of a psychologist, I guess. But you don't necessarily have that many business coaches helping organizations to understand what they need to do. Whereas in IT, you have a lot of that around the software development and delivery. Some key takeaways before we ask some questions, and I plunge into darkness here. There's a like vision has completely disappeared. Whether you like it or not, you will be in transformation mode in some point in your career. And I think it's going to be new next year, as I mentioned at the beginning. We think this year businesses are hunkering down. They're not spending any money. They are really trying to increase or maintain their profits by reducing their cost. But next year, you just can't keep doing that. You cannot shrink to greatness. You know, it's not a race to the bottom. You have to invest. And we're starting to see organizations saying we need to invest, but furthermore, we also need to transform. And transformations, you know, they do fail transformations, unfortunately, but being aware of why can help organizations, help people make good decisions, try and avoid them. For us in the sprint, the reason we look at the issues that could prevent you from failing is to go in with your eyes wide open. And if you're trying to do a big cultural transformation, your culture sucks, you're going from a very bad starting point. You know, if you're trying to build a new product and service and you haven't got the skills or people, again, you're starting from a bad point. So it's being aware of what those issues are. An agile business is much more than just IT agile methods. And it really is about focusing on creating customer value. That's what it's all about. If you can take that away from here as the one thing that you learn, that's the most important thing, because the customers are what keep you going. And some organizations that have got their business models been disrupted because they're not able to serve their customers, the customers are gone. And some organizations had no online experience at all for their customers. And now what are they doing? They're scrambling to get it sorted. Complexity is a killer, but I just don't think people really give it as much focus as they should. And simplification isn't that bad. It does require some bravery. I talked to some leaders and I try to get them to understand waste and some lean practices, but not necessarily get them embroiled in lean, but understanding what waste is all about, why a process is inefficient and can you make it better? The better you can make it, the better it is for everybody. But really about tackling some of those old platforms that are 50, 60 years old. They've been outsourced. Now is the time to take action. And that lighthouse approach, when you scale something down to skill up the team and make the transformational change more manageable, it's not rocket science. Many people have been talking about this for quite some time, but doing it in a transformational context with the leadership team observing and being able to give some guidance and course correction, for us, we think it's pretty important. And starting the right transformation doesn't take long. If you can do this in a 4-week period, and you've got everything sorted, then you let the team get on with the delivery. Much better than spending 4 or 5 months trying to work out what to do and then going off in the wrong direction. And as we say, we think that the modern business at the moment needs to transform, not just to thrive, but to survive. That seems to be what's happening, is that there'll be a lot of business really going out of business next year unless they do something about their transformations. And that was it. I wanted to leave some time for questions. Feel free to connect with me on all of this socials. And as I mentioned, our book is coming out hopefully in 3 weeks' time. We'll see. And you can find more detail about us on our business, agilebusiness.com website. That's it.
What I'll do, I'll be like the switchboard person, monitoring the chat. If anyone has anything to ask Finn about anything he's talked about, or any of the themes. I know there's been a few little things come up throughout the talk, but anything anyone wants to put to Finn?
Hi, it's Alan here. Hi, hello, Finn. Alan. Great conversation. Resonates very strongly with me, as I'm probably one of, in a minority, being sat on the business side and non-technical side. So my background is actually a product owner coach. So I sit on the business side and work with IT agile coaches. So I certainly don't know very much a lot about software development. And I was wondering, on that theme, is that something you would countenance as being something which will improve the chances of a successful transformation or successful change program?
I mean, having business coaches involved, you mean? I think it's...
Yeah, as part of the whole group. Yeah, right from the outset.
It's absolutely true. I think so much pressure is put on IT to deliver the transformation and define it, you know, where I think that the business teams can kind of like abdicate responsibility sometime. and just be responsible for the outcomes. And I think sometimes they can be involved in the design, and that's what we like to do. But business coaching, those of you that have done coaching or counseling or mentoring will know the differences. And quite often those ideas and what needs to be done to be successful are in people's heads. But quite often a lot of leaders tend to just be the loudest voice in the room, and we're going to do it this way, and everybody just says, okay. And there needs to be some challenge, and there needs to be, and coaching, I think, is a good way of doing that to get people to realize the direction that they need to go in.
Thanks, Finn. We've got something else in the chat here. We've got Rüdiger. Right, I'm reading this as with a Germanic pronunciation. Is that Rüdiger Wolf? Is that correct? Or Rüdiger Wolf? You're asking what is the importance of the system constraints in the transformation?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I talk about core platforms as a constraint. And for us, quite often you'll see that there's not enough bravery to address these platforms because of there's some transformations. Organizations want to do BAU at the same time. And so these two things can't happen. Quite often, a transformation is trying to go somewhere else, and you're adding more and more functionality to the old platform. That becomes a constraint in itself. So I think with shorter delivery cycles in the transformation allows you to companies to see that value is coming, or you can see value actually happening real time. They're less likely to then keep investing in the old platforms. But there's this sort of thing about, well, let's keep the old platform going because I don't think this transformation is going to happen. Or I don't understand that old platform. Maybe it's been outsourced, and all we have as an IT team are now people that are handling statements of work rather than real IT people that can say, hang on, we need to do a different approach.
Finn, you just brought back past trauma. Like the hair stand on the back of your neck. I was in a broadcaster doing a streaming platform, and there was so much emphasis put on feature parity from old to new, and there was a massive lack of kind of bold decisions about actually, do we still need to be providing that functionality versus where we're going to, what else have we got here? We've got someone here, Pratt says, what are the best ways to calculate if tech teams are delivering the right business values? Oh, this could be now if we were still in the pub in Camden when we started ACE, this could be a long talk, but
long talk. I prefer to do it in a pub actually rather than here and have that conversation. Is it the IT team's responsibility to deliver value, or is it the business team to give them the things which are of value? That's one of the first questions that I would ask. And when working with, what I used to do when I worked at Paddy Power is that we used to break work down into 2-day cycle times. So every task could be coded and tested and delivered in 2 days. And everything that we did had to have a value associated with it. But the value was allocated by the business, not by IT. But if you're using, and I know John Smart's here as well, he can probably chip in, but the flow of work, cycle time, lead time, all these things are great at giving you the metrics that business wants to see. I'm not a fan of using it to see if teams are productive. I prefer the metrics, and probably be in John's new book about, are the team happy? That happy teams are productive teams. And if teams collaborate together, they will deliver value. At least I hope they will.
I see, John, you've taken you put your camera on. Have you got anything to add to comment on that?
Only to say, yes, I agree, Finn.
Good. We've had a few beer conversations about this as well. So
yeah.
Completely agree with you, Finn. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's not about the feature factory. You can end up creating a Taylorist digital factory where you're measuring velocity and say-do ratio and feature counting. Like, no.
Exactly. No. And we often find that of that 100 things you ask the team to deliver, only 20% will give you 80% of the value, and people don't focus on that at all. It's about, I want everything because I need everything, but that's a lack of communication between certain teams. But anyway.
Great. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, I was just on that point. I was going to ask, but how do you make sure? Because I think what happens with some of the things that, you know, organizations need to deliver, like you say, is driven by, you know, you have a deadline, you have something else typically is driving it. But how do you make sure, what kind of initiatives you can follow to make sure that that customer value is not forgotten and that it continues to be part of a central thing that is driving your transformation, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the macro level, the thing that you're going to do should be for a customer. So it'll be, for instance, if you're looking to build out customers in a certain market, you're going to build a product or service for that customer. The individual components within it should have a value as well. And that's the thing that many organizations don't do. They don't add a value at a task level, at a feature level, so that you can just deliver the most valuable things and drop the other things on the floor. The measurement of the speed tends to be something that the IT teams get hit over the head with if they slow down. And so that's why I prefer uniform cycle times, so that it's the business analyst's job to make sure that the teams are delivering at a similar cadence. But it is hard, and it's about having a shared kind of ownership of that and not having the teams separate. So I'm big into multidisciplinary teams all working together. But as I said earlier on, I think organizational constraints stop that from happening. So you have the IT over here and business over here. And I think that kind of model is outdated now. So in my view.
Cool. Thanks for these questions, everyone. My inner coach, well, my outer coach, my coach is responding. There's an interesting question that's come up in the chat here. This is from Karen Sal. What advice can you offer to working with toxic people that leadership will not deal with to minimize their impact on the transformation? Different views in this one.
Yeah, it's a really hard one, because you've got to, I think there are two aspects to it. One is sometimes that toxic person hasn't got the awareness that they are. So it's being able to talk to them about the impact that they're having. If they completely ignore you and they still carry on being toxic, it's difficult, because as a leader, I think the mistake I made was not to deal with some people in that situation in my early part of my career. Later in my career, I started to fire those people, and that helped. And I'm not a nasty person, but sometimes when that person's gone, the whole dynamic of the team changes. The happiness goes up, the productivity goes up. But you can't have a single case, unfortunately. It's a person by person kind of situation. And we've seen leadership teams that love that toxic person because they're a subject matter expert, and they kind of think, well, if they're not here, we're going to crash and burn. And we say, that's not going to happen. At some point, they're going to leave because they have to retire. So, but it is a really difficult one. And you as a coach, you can cover this one. Maybe some NLP is required, Ben.
Oh, maybe. Yes, we were talking about that earlier. I was recently doing a coaching training program for managers, and we talked a lot about conflict. And I think some people are still kind of upset that no one can give one definitive answer to how to deal with all conflict. It's great, isn't it? You want to assume positive intent. You want to help that person be heard and try to understand what's going on with them and work with them, and you go through levels, don't you? But there isn't a magic one to go, da-da, everyone's going to be thinking the same way or working in the same way.
Right.
Have we got time for a couple more?
Yeah, I'm fine.
We've got one that's come up from Maya Rao. Many believe in achieving transformations by changing structure rather than changing culture. As a coach, you reveal that no one wants. I'm struggling a bit with that question. I think there's a typo in there. Maya, do you want to speak your question out to Finn?
Hey, yes, sorry about that. I'm on a bike ride and I stopped. And anyway, so yeah, I think as a coach, you reveal things, right? And no one actually, you go to the management, you go to the leadership, and no one wants to change. No one wants to pick these things up and help kind of move forward because they're busy. You know, what comes to my mind is a cartoon such as, from the Stone Age where, you got a barrel where it's got the square wheels and someone's offering the round wheels and they're like, oh, I'm too busy. How do you change these things?
Yeah, it's a difficult one because I heard you coming in and out there. I think it run over. But the thing with changing people always look for other solutions when a transformation not working, or perhaps to deliver transformation, and changing the structure is one thing that companies do a lot. But they don't change the strategy. They don't change the direction. They don't help the teams. And changing the structure causes, for me, another delay. It's another kind of like a wait point. And whilst a new team comes in and gets skilled up, I mean, you really are pushing more and more value down the chain. What we do is, our little company is just me and Hayden, just two of us. We tell companies about these issues because we've no fear about being kicked out the door. And so we're happy to say, look, you're dysfunctional, your organizational structure is dysfunctional, these people are toxic. We do that all the time. Much harder for internal people to do it, I must admit, and I don't have a perfect answer for you.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your question, Maya. Let's have one last question. Does anyone want to raise something audibly, or I'll go to the chat? Time for one more.
I'll just say while you're looking at that, which is the agilebusiness.com is our website, but we're also looking to create a community for people to actually share their ideas. We're going to put our material, everything that we do, our book of knowledge, actually up there. And it's going to be about a month away. And it's kind of like a mini LinkedIn for Agilists, so if that's the right word you can use. But we really want people to share and have a forum to get information for free. Like I said before, we like to give back to the community. So,
right.
Sorry, can I ask a question if there's still time?
No, go ahead.
Just a very quick one, actually, on communities. Have you seen, or do you think having an internal community within the organization can help drive that transformation? So say, for example, a community of practice.
I hope that people are not watching that. I probably set up communities of practice many years ago and watched them fail. It depends. I mean, you know, that's one of the things that you see from the Spotify model, which I don't believe in, and I don't think it exists, but they have that kind of view that you bring cross-functional teams together or people with the same skills, but they're in different groups, and create those communities of practice. It just depends who leads them. You know, it comes down to, if someone's passionate that leads it, it's a success. And if no one leads it, it crashes and burns. So, and there is value in sharing. There's no doubt about it, but you just can't always get people to do that.
Finn, so I have one follow-up, and it's Alex V, who's just basically, I think I've missed his question. Alex, do you want to speak up on the mic?
Yeah, sure, will do.
There you are.
Thanks,
Hi.
Ben. Yeah, I don't think this is a question that you answered earlier in your explanation. You were talking about the challenge between needing to transform and still people wanting to keep the lights on. I think you said they still want to deliver BAU on the existing platform.
Yeah.
Especially now in COVID and what was on the curve earlier. This is definitely as much of the thing as ever, I think. So I was just wondering, what advice would you give to talking to leaders in organisations about that?
We try, and it depends on your work practices. So we try to feature early delivery of value in terms of weeks, not in terms of months and years. If a program's going to deliver something next year, there's a high chance that the person will be gone, or the initiative will be killed, or BAU will suck all the resources, and that tends to happen. And you know, even if it's a consultant team that's delivering a transformation from you, they need access to the BAU resources because they've got all the knowledge. So it's making them aware that behavior is one of the big things that helps you to fail. And you've really got to dial down BAU and dial up transformation. And the only way they accept it is if you can deliver it faster. So it's a conundrum. It's a catch-22. I know, I understand that. So, and it's a case-by-case basis, but we tend to be very blunt when we talk to organizations about it. So
yeah, cool. Thanks.
Cool, thanks, Alex. I'm going to wrap things up there. I want to say thank you very much to Finn for presenting his subject, and it's good to have you on an event actually finally. As I made aware at the beginning, I've been aware of your work for a few years now.
Lovely.
Thanks very much for being part of the event tonight, and thanks for everyone's contributions and thoughtful questions. And John, I know you tied in as well there quite well. Thank you very much. Last thing for me to say for this time is I want to thank again Simon Machin for help with the Zoom connection tonight. Thanks very much, everyone. Thanks again to Finn, and keep in touch. I hope everyone's doing well, and we'll see you soon.
See you.